Well, here we are. Um, this is not this is not fun, and this is interesting, and it's deeply important. But like, don't listen to this with your kids in the room. Don't listen to this with your missus in the room. Maybe. This is awful. This is one of the worst things I've read in my entire life. It does confirm some suspicions that I have had and at times been more vocal about, and at times been a bit more maybe self-censoring about. But this document is pretty important and quite timely, and I think it's about time that people get off their high horses and start having a discussion about this, because this is not cool. This is not cool. And you can bet that this is not just happening in the UK. This is for sure not just happening in Britain. This is happening, no doubt, all around the world, all around the West. And you can do your own research into why that might be. So yeah, I take no pleasure in this. Okay, and this is one of those traditional cases of everyone loves to play this game of, oh, everyone's got their own agenda and everyone's got their own axe to grind. Yo, I don't. I never wanted to be right about this. When I was having conversations early in, say, 2020, late 2019, if I recall correctly, when I was living in the Netherlands and the whole COVID thing was just breaking out, and I expressed early concerns about this health crisis being used to implement things like curfews and sort of movement controls and health passports and stuff like that. All of those concerns were dismissed as, for instance, a conspiracy theory, and they turned out to be true as well. So I, yeah, I don't even know what to say. I have no idea what to say about this. I'm just gonna start reading it because yeah, it's rough, and I wouldn't be able to put it as cleanly as this. I wouldn't be able to phrase something so horribly filthy as cleanly as it has been put here. Don't know what else to say. I'm just gonna get started. Acknowledgements. Every witness who volunteered their testimony, whether survivor, parent, whistleblower, politician, or expert, showed courage that made this inquiry possible. Their contributions have ensured that the truth is now a matter of permanent public record. Rupert Lowe MP's energy and commitment ensured that the rape gang inquiry took place. He has been unwavering in his devotion to making sure that this rotting stain on our country's history has remained firmly in the public eye. Deep gratitude is extended to the entire inquiry team, led by Sammy Woodhouse. Nat Enderby Shenton, Marlon West, Deborah Sudby, and Julie Bellin worked tirelessly to bring the evidence together and support every survivor who came forward. A special thank you is owed to MPs Esther McVeigh, Nick Timothy, and Carla Lockhart for taking the time to sit on the inquiry panel. Dr. Mark Dury has been extremely generous in enriching the report that follows with his expert knowledge. We are grateful to Charlie Downs, Joshua Firm, Harrison Pitt, and Graham Smith for the editorial oversight and counsel. Last but not least, we thank the untold thousands across Britain who made all of this possible by donating to ensure that this inquiry could take place. This is a good warm up. Anyways, so this was not a government inquiry. This had to be funded by public people, members of the public, to donate money to get this thing done, to have this investigation carried out, because for some reason the police and the government were uninterested in investigating the following. Quote, Britain doesn't have a racism problem, it has an immigration problem. Rupert Lowe. As is the case with many decent, hard-working Britons, I was unaware of the sheer scale of the evil that has been, and continues to be, perpetrated by chiefly Pakistani Muslim men against vulnerable young white women and girls in communities up and down our country. But a single court transcript from one such horrific case, amplified by Elon Musk early last year, set in motion a long overdue national reckoning on the matter that inspired over 20,000 British patriots to help fund our rape gang inquiry. Sorry, I'm going to keep saying inquiry and inquiry, whatever. What follows is a comprehensive report of its findings. It is essential that all related court documents are securely preserved, both for legal and historical reasons. I am grateful to everyone on my team who has contributed to exposing this demonic chapter in Britain's history. A combination of the paralysing fear of racism accusations and the scramble for votes from imported foreign subcultures meant that pure evil was allowed to metastasize. Nor is the horrendous ordeal over. The root cause was immigration, beginning with the British Nationality Act 1948 and escalating under Tony Blair from 1997 onwards. Believing proud nations to be responsible for the mid-20th century destruction of Europe, our post-war leaders embraced diversity and multiculturalism as the supposedly civilized alternative. This report establishes beyond any doubt that this open society obsession has in fact enabled untold barbarism of its own. Oil and water do not mix, and cultural differences going back centuries are the genesis of this problem. I urge all Britons to read this report in full. Lessons need to be learned and prosecutions need to follow for the appalling cowardice of those responsible for refusing to resist such horrors. The strongest possible penalties, up to and including death, must also be sought for those yet to be properly punished, or indeed punished at all, for their vile, unspeakable crimes. The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it. Albert Einstein. Man is the cruelest animal, Friedrich Nietzsche. They haven't done a good job of formatting those quotes. Let's chuck some quotation marks around there. Anyways, introduction. Wow, I can't believe I'm saying these words. The Rape Gang Inquiry has now concluded the first phase of its work. It was established to examine one of the most horrendous scandals in the long history of our country, the systematic targeting of vulnerable girls, overwhelmingly white British, by predominantly Muslim Pakistani gangs across towns and cities up and down the nation. The evidence presented throughout the hearings confirmed what had long been known but repeatedly denied by many in the political class. The inquiry welcomed girls, boys, men and women of all races and religions to testify to their experiences to gain a complete picture of the rape gang phenomenon. The Casey report of 2025 stated that disproportionate numbers of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds were among the suspects for group-based child sexual exploitation, CSE. Baroness Casey quoted local reports showing that a significant proportion of those convicted were of Pakistani and or Muslim heritage. The crimes stretch back generations. The rape gang inquiry was necessary because the state and its institutions have failed catastrophically over decades. Police, social services, schools, the NHS, licensing authorities, governments allowed these gangs to operate with impunity. There was a demonstrable lack of political will to confront them. The Labour Party initially refused a public inquiry altogether, only relenting under considerable pressure. It will be many years before this inquiry is complete, and there is no guarantee that it will adequately address the politically sensitive, ethno-religious nature of the phenomenon. Despite now pushing for an inquiry in opposition, when in government, the Conservative Party did very little. The rape gang inquiry was survivor-led. Every day the panel sat with Sammy Woodhouse, a survivor-turned-activist herself, alongside a variety of experts who attended whenever their specialist subject formed the focus of our efforts to get to the truth. We examined distinct areas of the scandal in turn so that a maximally full picture could be established. Parents and carers described their experiences. Instances of pregnancy, abortion, and children born of rape were laid bare. Whistleblowers who had previously been ignored gave evidence. Policing and justice failures were documented. Social care, NHS services, including sexual health and mental health, education, taxi licensing, demographic trends, cultural and social issues, and ideological obstructions to justice were all scrutinised without restriction. Nothing was off the table. Misguided political correctness and cultural sensitivities played no part in the proceedings. The promise made to every donor was honoured in full, the truth was pursued, and justice was our only objective. Survivors were finally given the platform they had been denied for so long and were central to the inquiry. The full scale and nature of crimes can now be placed on the public record. The true horror of what took place is no longer hidden. Although the inquiry lacked statutory powers, the response was overwhelming. Politicians, whistleblowers, experts, family members, and many others came forward. Those few in prominent positions who declined to give evidence did so knowing that their refusal would be noted. This report sets out findings and makes clear recommendations for how the problem of rape gangs can be eradicated. The country now knows the full truth. The country has been given the basis for justice. The country has the roadmap to ensure these crimes never happen again. Executive summary. The rape gang inquiry examined the systematic targeting of vulnerable girls, overwhelmingly white British, by predominantly Muslim Pakistani gangs across towns and cities throughout the United Kingdom. The evidence put to the inquiry confirms that the scandal constitutes one of the most horrendous failures in the history of the country. Organised networks of perpetrators built coordinated operations that transported victims between locations, supplied them with drugs and alcohol, recorded abuse for distribution and blackmail, and passed girls between multiple adult men. These crimes have been committed for decades, since the 1950s, by Pakistanis in particular, and have affected every region of our nation. The scale of the crimes committed is staggering. It has been previously established that, at the very least, 250,000 young white girls have been subjected to repeated rape, gang rape, trafficking, torture, pregnancy, forced Islamic conversion, and lifelong trauma. The true number is probably higher. The perpetrators bear primary responsibility, yet the institutional failures that enabled them for decades must also be confronted. In court records and official inquiries, around 87% of those convicted in these group-based child sexual exploitation cases bore distinctively Muslim names. These are referenced claims, by the way. All of the claims they're making here are referenced. I'm not saying this. This is the words of the report. The vast majority of men involved in these gangs were not convicted. The vast majority of men involved in these gangs were not convicted. The vast majority of men involved in these gangs were not convicted. Dr. Taj Hage, an imam with the Oxford Islamic Congregation, believes the true proportion of gang members who are Muslims to be around 95%. This figure far exceeds the Muslim share of the overall United Kingdom population. The overwhelming majority of the rape gang networks consisted entirely of men from Muslim backgrounds, predominantly of Pakistani heritage, although smaller groups from Somali, Iranian, Syrian, Turkish, and other Muslim origins were also involved. The inquiry heard harrowing testimony from survivors and their families. The method used to groom children typically followed the same process. Girls as young as 11 were initially befriended by a young Muslim man, who then treated the young child like an adult and would then start providing them with alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes. After a few months, the girls would then be collected from school gates, care homes, and streets in taxis. They were taken to houses, flats, restaurants, and hotels where they were raped repeatedly by groups of men, tortured, filmed for blackmail, and told they were white trash or kuffar who merited punishment. Many became pregnant while still children. Some miscarried under trauma. Others endured coerced abortions, and some gave birth to children who were later removed by the state. We found that the same unspeakable crimes occurred in at least 149 local authority districts, close to 40% of all such districts across the United Kingdom. See page 14 for our full map. Survivors described daily rapes, red rooms of extreme torture, trafficking between cities, and institutional disbelief that compounded their suffering. Some girls were even trafficked to the Middle East, where they would endure Islamic marriage. The demographic and cultural drivers are clear. Perpetrators from Pakistani Muslim and other Muslim backgrounds operated under an honor and shame-based clan code that treated non-Muslim girls, especially white working-class girls, as property available for sexual use. This pattern was reinforced by 8 theological and legal aspects of Islam. These include the doctrine of Muslim superiority drawn from Quranic verses that position Muslims at the top with a duty to correct non-believers. The gang members' justification for their crimes can be found in the Islamic principles of loyalty and disavowal, known as al-wala wa al-bara. It demands enmity towards non-Muslims, the superiority of men over women, forced marriage combined with the absence of any fixed minimum age of consent, the perception of female sexuality as inherently dangerous, a system of sex slavery that authorizes sexual relations with non-Muslim captives, and a religiously sanctioned social hierarchy that subjugates conquered non-Muslims. These elements, filtered through clannish immigrant subcultures, provided religious justification that enabled the systematic rape and even slaughter of white British girls. Were Britain functioning effectively, these girls would have received considerable state protection. However, every one of our institutions failed them catastrophically. Police forces ignored repeated reports, criminalized victims instead of perpetrators, destroyed evidence, and allowed known rapists to walk free on bail. Social care services undermined protective parents, placed children in trafficking hubs inside children's homes, closed cases despite clear indicators of exploitation, and retaliated against whistleblowers. The NHS recorded genital injuries, multiple sexually transmitted infections in children as young as 13, pregnancies caused by rape and suicide attempts, yet discharged victims back to their abusers without safeguarding referrals or trauma care. Schools observed older men collecting girls at the gates, heard disclosures of rape on school premises, and responded by excluding victims rather than protecting them. Taxi licensing authorities renewed permits for drivers who formed the logistical backbone of the networks, and collapsed in the face of organised protest when basic safety measures were proposed. Sorry, I'm struggling to comprehend what I'm reading because it's literally so shocking. I'm struggling to keep up with what I'm reading because it is shocking me to the core. Taxi licensing authorities renewed permits for drivers who formed the logistical backbone of the networks and collapsed in the face of organised protest when basic safety measures were proposed. Political failure lies at the heart of the scandal. Successive governments lacked the will to confront the ethnic and religious patterns. I'm blowing up this mic. Am I blowing up this mic? No, it's all good. The Labour Party bears particular responsibility. It initially refused a public inquiry and only relented under pressure by ordering a process viewed with widespread scepticism. Labour-dominated councils and MPs were briefed on the gangs long ago, yet later denied knowledge. The party prioritised electoral reliance on Muslim voting blocs, and then blocked or watered down inquiries, suppressed ethnicity data, and framed legitimate concerns as far-right agitation. Let me repeat. Labour-dominated councils and MPs were briefed on the gangs long ago, yet later denied knowledge. The party prioritised electoral reliance on Muslim voting blocs, and then blocked or watered down inquiries, suppressed ethnicity data, and framed legitimate concerns as far-right agitation. When finally forced to act, the Labour government produced a national inquiry whose tightly drawn terms of reference deliberately excluded systematic examination of the demographic, cultural, and religious drivers. The Conservative Party, while in government, continued with Labour's approach and failed to impose mandatory ethnicity recording or launch a full statutory inquiry, despite clear evidence from Rotherham and elsewhere. Scottish political parties have refused a dedicated inquiry and failed to record offender ethnicity. Political correctness, fear of accusations of racism, and fear of losing electoral support from certain demographies have taken precedence over the protection of British children. Whistleblowers, parents, and survivors who came forward showed extraordinary courage despite having been met in the past with disbelief and intimidation. The perpetrators operated with impunity because the state enabled them. The evidence now demands immediate and decisive action to eradicate the problem, deliver justice for the victims, and ensure these abhorrent crimes are eradicated from our shores. We now have a clearer sense of the problem. There are a number of measures necessary to resolve them, up to and including considerable changes to our criminal justice system, the passage of legislation aimed at targeting specifically gang-based CSE, and a great amount of institutional overhaul. A detailed list of recommendations includes improved data recording on ethno-religious patterns among offenders, far stronger sentencing, a comprehensive deportation effort, institutional accountability measures, multi-agency coordination, specialist training, enhanced safeguarding through greater family involvement, and closing the various gaps in British law through which so many victims fell. Following the publication of this report, we intend to release the full witness testimonies, gather additional survivor accounts, identify those responsible in Parliament, and begin civil and private legal actions to ensure maximal accountability. That sounds... that... Finally some relief. This is such a brutal read, man. I hate this so much. I'm not enjoying this. Overview of crimes. Rape gangs have exploited children systematically across every region of the United Kingdom for decades. Fuck, man. It's so punishing. It's just so punishing to be like... to be in a place in my own mind where I'm sufficiently desensitized to this that I'm able to read it without bursting into tears. This is brilliant. It's a wonderful world that we live in. Rape gangs, this is the overview of crimes, and I think I probably will read this and actually finish recording, because I don't know how much of my day I can possibly commit to reviewing this. As you can see, it's... if you're on screen, if I just scroll down here, anything you read is going to be pretty brutal. Maybe I'll do that. I'll read the overview of crimes, and then I'll just make 3 random scrolls and read you the central paragraph, whatever's on screen. Because I'm sure that they wouldn't have wasted a word. I'm sure that whatever I land on will be... there's going to be no flim-flam in here. Rape gangs have exploited children systematically across every region of the United Kingdom for decades. The independent chair of the Centre for Excellence for Children's Care and Protection, Alexis Jay, has identified the 1970s as the decade when immigrant rape gangs first began tormenting the girls of Britain. However, the British Newspaper Archive reveals that the first recorded case of specifically Pakistani rape gangs dates back to 1955, when 4 Bradford-based Pakistanis were charged with raping a 15-year-old girl from Middlesbrough. This was soon after former colonial subjects from the subcontinent as much as the Caribbean became eligible to enter the United Kingdom in non-trivial numbers under the British Nationality Act 1948. What began as singular and small-scale instances became systematic and industrial over time. These horrific crimes have only escalated in recent decades, especially following Tony Blair's 1997 victory and the start of orchestrated mass immigration. With greater numbers came greater opportunities for abuse. Perpetrators built organised networks that transported victims between towns and cities and passed girls between multiple adult men. In each of these areas, the same tactics were used. Girls as young as 11 were targeted with gifts, alcohol and drugs, collected in taxis from school gates, care homes and streets, and taken to houses, flats, restaurants and hotels, and then raped repeatedly by groups of men, passed between perpetrators, trafficked across county lines, and in many cases impregnated or forced into abortions. Most victims endured violence, were filmed for blackmail, or told they were white trash or kuffar who deserved punishment. The authorities at every level, including the police, social services, health services, schools, licensing bodies, and politicians, knew the patterns, possessed the intelligence, and still failed to protect the country's children. The evidence establishes that a national scandal of repeated rape, trafficking, torture, and pregnancy, forced Islamic conversion, and lifelong trauma enabled by institutional denial, political calculation, and fear of the accusation of racism took place over decades. Sorry, that was a rough read. The evidence establishes that a national scandal of repeated rape, trafficking, torture, pregnancy, forced Islamic conversion, and lifelong trauma enabled by institutional denial, political calculation, and fear of the accusation of racism took place over decades. The incidents of criminal activities listed in this report are drawn from court records, official and unofficial inquiries across the country, and witness testimony provided to the inquiry. They confirm that this was never a series of isolated local failures. It was a coordinated, nationwide pattern of organized child sexual exploitation that repeated in town after town, city after city, from the far north to the south coast. The same ethnic and religious profile of the perpetrators was documented throughout almost all of the witnesses who contacted the inquiry. The scale of the rape gang phenomenon is endemic across the entirety of Britain. The 250,000 figure originates directly from a statement in the House of Lords by Lord Pearson of Rannoch on 14th of May 2019. Quote, "Do the government accept that if we extrapolate nationally the J report on Rotherham and other reports from Telford and Oxford, there appear to have been upwards of 250,000 young white girls raped in this century, very largely by Muslim men, usually several times a day, for years?" He added that this number is probably an underestimate. This extrapolation now has greater support due to further data that has been collected derived from scaling the patterns documented in major inquiries. Rotherham, J Report 2014. At least 1,400 girls abused between 1997 and 2013, with some updated estimates exceeding this. Perpetrators were overwhelmingly Pakistani Muslim men. Telford Inquiry 2022, more than 1,000 children, predominantly girls, over decades, again with the same perpetrator profile. National Footprint. The grooming gang model has been confirmed in dozens of towns and cities. Our independent inquiry, led by Rupert Lowe MP, has heard evidence demonstrating coordinated operations extending to all corners of the country in at least 149 local authority districts. See page 14 for the full map. When the Rotherham-Telford scale is applied across the documented national distribution and multiplied by the extreme underreporting factor accepted by official reviews, the total reaches the 250,000 threshold as a bare minimum. We are far from grasping the full extent of grooming gang criminality in modern Britain. It is reasonable to assume that, since sexual abuse of all kinds tends to be underreported, this is also true of grooming gangs. The Independent has reported that almost 19,000 children were identified as sexual exploitation victims in England in 1 year alone, despite the reluctance of state actors to name or tackle the problem of the rape gangs. After decades of abuse, victims must number in the hundreds of thousands. The full scale is not yet known. Every major review has emphasized that recorded statistics severely understate reality. Baroness Casey, National Audit on Group-Based Child Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, June 2025. The audit explicitly states that the scale, nature, and characteristics of group-based child sexual exploitation remain impossible to quantify, precisely due to inconsistent data collection and historical suppression. Independent inquiry into child sexual abuse and multiple local inquiries, 2022 to 2025, it is simply not possible to know the scale, because ethnicity, group offending, and historical cases were routinely unrecorded or shelved to protect community cohesion. Overleaf is a heat map that portrays the various locations in which the inquiry can be sure the rape gangs operated. It is likely that the true extent is far worse. The scale, the tactics, the perpetrator profile, and the systemic inaction were almost always identical everywhere. The scale, the tactics, the perpetrator profile, and the systemic inaction were almost always identical everywhere. Britain did not face dozens of separate local scandals. It faced one national scandal that the state allowed to grow for decades. Bro. This is so nasty. So I do 3 random scrolls and read a paragraph. From the age of 13, she was groomed by 3 adult Pakistani brothers who supplied her with alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. She was raped while intoxicated, including one occasion when she was taken upstairs while her sister tried to intervene. Because of her upbringing, she thought this was normal, that they were her boyfriends and that they loved her. She would go missing for extended periods and was subjected to repeated daily sexual abuse. The perpetrators would collect her from school, her home, and public places, using threats of violence to coerce and control her. Here's an additional scroll. We'll do another random scroll. Similar patterns have appeared in accounts from grooming gang survivors. Some have described approaching the police only to be interviewed by Muslim officers who switched off the recording device and urged her to abandon her complaint due to supposed lack of evidence. A deeply ingrained culture of enforced loyalty and community protection can discourage individuals from reporting abuses or providing evidence against members of their own group. Had the social worker in Hannon's case reported her disclosures to the police, leading to her father facing criminal charges, he would have exposed himself, and by extension those associated with him, to the serious risk of being labelled a traitor within the community. And one more random scroll. Where am I? Oh, that was a random scroll, but is this actually... Oh, I'll just read it. The existing legislative framework is fragmented, inconsistently applied, and deliberately blind to the ethnic and religious patterns documented in this inquiry and the Casey National Audit. As we have noted above, the Sexual Offences Act 2003 and the Modern Slavery Act 2015, among other relevant statutes, already contain powers that were never used to any significant effect against the rape gangs. Ethnicity recording, too, remains either patchy or absent. Group-based child sexual exploitation is not even a distinct offence with its own sentencing guidelines. The result is a system that records thousands of individual offences while concealing, deliberately or otherwise, the organised nature of the predation. One more time, for those in the back. The result is a system that records thousands of individual offences while concealing, deliberately or otherwise, the organised nature of the predation. Boy. This thing is... That's one heck of a report. That is comprehensive, I'd say. That's the victim testimonies there. Some of the most shocking shit you'll ever read. There was a period of nearly 4 years before any trial was held, largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The perpetrators used this time to spread rumours portraying the abuse as consensual and to boast about the assaults. In the courtroom, the abuse and intimidation continued. They pulled faces, pointed and laughed at her, and made rude remarks about her appearance. This behaviour was not addressed by the court. One of the brothers was convicted of sexual assault, and as he was taken into custody, shouted, Allahu Akbar. Holy fuck, what a scroll. At the sentencing, the brother's sister shouted abuse at Anna, threatened her, and later breached her anonymity online. She blamed the jury, stating they were all white. She was eventually arrested and charged with malicious communications. Anna states there is a broader failure to confront the role of ethnicity, religion, and cultural dynamics in organised sexual exploitation due to fear of accusations of racism. I don't want to be too sarcastic saying this, but believe all women, right? Believe all women. They should collect the testimony of all 250,000 of those girls, and they should compile it, and then they should put every politician who's responsible for this nonsense in solitary confinement with the full collection of witness testimonies and victim testimonies, and force them to read every single word and book report every single word, and that can be their sentence. And if they can't get through that, too bad. They should have to face that and nothing but that. If you I've had like a couple, it's like a couple ideas. There was this, was it Bernie Madoff, or who's that Warren Buffett, I think it was, and he said something about he could fix the deficit in 1 hour, or like in one day, by passing legislation that meant that all members of the government were only paid the average wage of the American worker, or something like that. Like, basically just like you could immediately sort out all of the corruption in the country by just reducing financial incentives for politicians. if you take a job that allows you to like gives you some sort of authority, some sort of rubber stamp to do plumbing work. Say you take a job as a plumber and you produce a piece of paper, legitimate or otherwise, that says that you're a certified plumber, you're qualified, you're experienced, you know what you're doing. And you go out to someone's house and you cause damage to that house through your work, you're liable. And you might have limited liability and you might have insurance, but to a certain extent you're liable. If you were a plumber at someone's house and this is an analogy that I've extrapolated a million times to describe governments in the way that, like, if you hired someone to come to your house and do a job and they fucked that up 20 times and kept on coming back and demanding full payment before they came back and made another mistake, you would surely find another plumber. You would think about doing it yourself. At what point would you say, maybe it's worth trying it myself? Maybe it's worth trying to fix this problem without going to the authority on the matter. Because if the authority on the matter produces this, like, we've lived in a perfect, because we eliminated all of the evil in the world at the end of World War II, right? And so there was no more evil except for racism, except for white people and racism. The main problems that we had were racism and white people, in that order, after the war. But as long as we get rid of all the white people and then get rid of racism, like maybe even exterminate the white people and then get rid of racism, then would be sweet. It turns out that there are other problems in the world as well. Yep. And because and you've heard it mentioned 3 times here, at some point, something along these lines, Anna states there is a broader failure to confront the role of ethnicity, religion, and cultural dynamics in organized sexual exploitation due to the fear of accusations of racism. Damn, bro. Yeah, I recently saw a video on X, formerly Twitter, of a a man straddling another man in the street and trying to cut his head off with a knife. And after I saw that video, I thought to myself, man, racism is such a problem in this world, isn't it? There is such a we really need to confront the evils of the patriarchy now. Because if we don't achieve social justice now, how else are we going to be able to get more of this? You know what I mean? And as I described in a video that I did just the other day, except the audio was a bit muffled, but maybe I'll go through this process again one day. And I asked, how has quality of life changed in the last 50 years in New Zealand? And the thing presented me with a couple of arguments for how things have gotten better. Things have gotten better because there was improved social justice, and there was better gender inclusivity, and people could get better technology these days and better products and better vehicles, which I would argue is a lie. And long story short, everyone knows that a 1990s Toyota is 10 times more reliable and cheaper to run than a modern car of any kind. But we've got all these good products, and we've got the social equity, and you can be as gay as you like. On the downside, It's 4 times harder to buy a house than it was 50 years ago. Unemployment is at an all-time high. Um, the cost of living, like groceries and utilities, is at an all-time high. Economic mobility is at an all-time low. Immigration is at an all-time high to counteract or to compensate for the birth rate being at an all-time low. So you have you to be fair, at least, despite there are now fewer economic opportunities for the native population, and it is harder to buy a house, and it is harder to find work, and it's harder to find entry level jobs, and it's harder to scale your career over time, and it's harder to acquire wealth, and it's harder to acquire the capital means of expanding your business. It's harder to project a family budget across a 5-10 year timeline. It's harder to foresee the likelihood of you starting a family or ever being able to afford to have children. But at least you can be more gay. And you can have more gang rape. So at least we're smashing the patriarchy. Is this smashing the patriarchy? This that's what this is? That's a smashing. Is that the liberation? Is this good and feminist? Is this a religion of peace? Is that what this report describes? Do we believe all women? Believe all women minus the approximately 250,000 minimum white British girls that have been subjected to gang rape and torture over the last 5 decades. 7 decades. Over the last 70 years. Specifically the last 50, but like as far back as the 70s. Sorry, as far back as the 50s. As far back as the mid 50s, but really beginning to pick up in the 70s. But you never heard about it, but you heard all about you heard all about you heard all about you heard all about rape culture. You never heard about rape gangs. Damn, bro. I'm glad I don't live in your brain because it is dry as a bone up in that bitch. I mean, as I'll be dying of thirst. I want to see some thoughtful responses to this report from the Gays for Palestine crew. That'd be dope. See some thoughtful responses to this from the Believe All Women crew. That would be exceptionally awesome. I would love to see a public petition to get Keir Starmer to produce a book report on this inquiry, on this report. To produce a report on this report, to prove that he's read and comprehended the contents. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be losing a lot of sleep over the course because I feel that I need to understand this. And I live in the Commonwealth. New Zealand's at least to some extent a British colony still, right? Got this. I have to walk this tightrope of my mixed allegiance to the people of the land and the people of the treaty, all recognised under Crown law. This is a Commonwealth nation. I feel myself responsible for reading and understanding this. Maybe just everyone should. Maybe it's one of those like, have you read the Bible? Have you read the Bhagavad Gita? Have you read Horton Hears a Who? Have you read the Rape Gang Inquiry Report? Maybe we should just maybe this should just be like just we did it over COVID. That was a crisis. How like if we shut down the economy to save just one life because it was necessary. If it just saved one life, we need them passports. We need to shut down the economy. Fuck the borders. Just lock it down, baby. We need curfews. Stay at home. Shelter in place. Deliver your groceries. Sanitize them. Masks on, boy, because we need to save every possible conceivable life. And we'll pay you to stay home. We'll pay you to just suffer in silence. We'll pay you to isolate. Because if it saves one life, boy, it'd be worth enslaving your children's children to the compound interest of the debt we take out to sustain this period of economic inactivity. Well, if that was the case, and I fully believe it was, if it was so worth it, if we saved lives, and knowing that protecting people from trauma is the highest priority of the popular politic, that if it saves lives, maybe everyone could get a paid week off to read this thing. Can we get some what do they call that? I can't even remember what that parachute money they gave everyone. Can we get a support payment? Can I get a paid week off to read this thing just so that I can get just because it seems like a very well written report on something that's quite important and it's quite significant. And like, I'm not gonna do whataboutism. Like, yeah, I think all the wars should stop. I think all the violence, all the evil, all the slavery. I would like it if it all stopped. Okay, so let's have a chat about it. By all means, keen for it to all stop, all of it. This is one of my priorities. I think this is important to me at least. I find this really important. Um, so I'm gonna read it. I'm not gonna enjoy it. This has sucked. I think what should happen first, before this goes any further, I think what we need is a counter inquiry just to make sure that none of those 250,000 girls did or said anything racist to provoke their systematic abuse. Because if they had maybe like said something, or like if they'd like made like a offensive post or something on Facebook, that might make it all fair game, because then they would have probably incited this violence by they would have inflamed the voice of the unheard by agitating racial tensions through far right social media extremism. So maybe we should actually. I think probably it's actually realistically it's time to look into these 250,000 girls and just make sure they're not all racists. I think that's probably the highest priority, really, if I think about it. So I'm just going to leave it at that. We need the details of all these girls, and we need to get them served up with some papers now, just to make sure that this whole thing isn't just a racist farce. Because the only reason anyone would write pause. The only reason that you would write 63,317 words on a given topic um, would be because you're a racist and a bigot. And so we need an investigation into um, what about Rupert Lowe is it that makes him so racist that he feels the need to write 63,000 words about police, men, rape, sexual abuse, Muslim, child exploitation, grooming, children, gang, girls, social, gangs, home, redacted, page, listen. So these are just the most common words appearing in this report. Listen, services, told, daughter, inquiry, Chloe, evidence, care, raped, Kate, family, victims, including time, mother, perpetrators, years, failed, taken, must, school, house, non, forced, life, Muslims. Ooh, that's you could someone make a slam poem out of this. Most commonly used non-common key most frequently used non-common keywords on this URL, therapepreport.co.uk. A big old bedtime read for anyone who actually still gives a shit about anything. Okay, if you still have a heart or a soul, if you still care, if you still have the capacity to care about things, this might affect you. If not, you probably aren't watching. So that's all good. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm just gonna start rambling otherwise. Fuck, that is hefty, brother. That is hefty. And the reason of the reason that I've got these tabs open on the side about MAID, which is medical assistance in dying, in which is not yet legal in the UK. I just looked that up, but it is legal in Canada, for instance. So it's becoming more popular in the West. Is that there are increasingly cases of people who are pushed through the system. And you think, oh, how can that happen? Well, in the same way that a girl who is gang raped can not achieve the justice that she would desire by going to the system, well, someone who goes to get some medical treatment might not necessarily get the treatment they desire and be pushed in a certain direction by that system as well. And one of those directions that's now available to the Canadian system is medical assistance in dying. And one of the eligibility criteria, aside from being at least 18 years old, is that you have a grievous or irremediable medical condition. Irremediable. So you have an unfixable medical condition. Okay, irremediable. There's no remedy. But that can be defined as you must have a serious illness, disease, or disability, be in an advanced state of decline that cannot be reversed, experience unbearable physical or mental suffering from your illness, disease, disability, or state of decline that cannot be relieved under conditions that you consider acceptable. So there's a broad spectrum, and included in these criteria are mental suffering. If your only medical condition is a mental illness, you are not eligible for medical assistance in dying. So there is increasingly support for that, but yeah. If you, for instance, had like a lasting injury from an assault and unbearable mental suffering, and you were in an advanced state of decline that couldn't be reversed, then you could also be pushed through the pipeline to just be euthanized. So I know it's a stretch. I know I'm self-censoring again because I'm like, oh, yo, I'm not trying to make the slippery slope argument, but that's the slope. That's what's at the bottom of the slope. Is, yo, are you sick? We could kill you for you. If you were dead, you wouldn't be sick. And that's where we're headed. That's seeming like the only two ways for the West as time goes on. At least if you were dead, you wouldn't be sick. This is crooked, brother. We got some problems. We got some big old problems in the West. And we are about to have a serious reckoning on them. Because it's not going away anytime soon. And this is only going to amplify tensions, and justly so. If this is the current state of affairs, then tensions need to be amplified. What we don't need in the face of a report which suggests that over 250,000 girls have been systematically sexually abused over the last 5 decades in Britain alone. What we don't need is like more unity. We need action to stop the rape gang crisis. That's what we need. That's not like that's a that like yeah. When I see a video on X of someone getting attacked with a knife in the street, it doesn't make me afraid of my phone. It makes me afraid of getting attacked with a knife on the street. So stop blaming people for being aware of what is going on. It's going on. It's been going on. You haven't said any. You don't want to say nothing about it because certain members of your family who bully you over the dinner table at Christmas conversations won't hear a word about anything. Literally just won't actually have a conversation about anything because, as I've discussed at length, the most common political discourse these days is, shut the fuck up, bro. What, you think you're going to be racist? You're going to be fascist around here? I'm not going to accept any racism or fascism around here. Gang rape would be fine. We'd have more of that. Give me more of that. But there'll be no racism on my watch, bro. Oh my god, bro. I'm an anti-fascist. That's why I'm organizing with all my friends to go around and beat people up who disagree with us. Yeah. Yo. The discourse is fucked. The kids are not alright. And, this is going on too. So it's time to pull your head out of your ass because no one's gonna stop, like, if the definition, if all that it is required, or one of the minimum required, one of the minimum criteria for legitimately labeling someone a racist becomes that they oppose gang rape, then call me a racist, man. Because that's where you're like, that's what my stated position here is no to gang rape. Okay? Not because I'm a white supremacist, but because of my compassion for women and my moral concern and genuine disgust at the sheer scale and travesty of this evil. The actual level and scale of this crisis is obscene, disgusting, foul, and demonic, as Rupert Lowe says. As is the case with many decent, hard-working Britons, I was unaware of the sheer scale of the evil that has been and continues to be perpetrated by chiefly Pakistani Muslim men against vulnerable young white women and girls in communities up and down our country. But a single court transcript from one such horrific case, amplified by Elon Musk early last year, set in motion a long overdue national reckoning on the matter that inspired over 20,000. So 20,000 people got together to fund this. I urge all Britons to read this report in full. Lessons need to be learned, and prosecutions need to follow for the appalling cowardice of those responsible for refusing to resist such horrors. The strongest possible penalties, up to and including death, must also be sought for those yet to be properly punished, or indeed punished at all, for their vile, unspeakable crimes. The world is a dangerous place to live in, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it. Well, that's all I have to say about that. Go do some breathing exercises and like curl up in the fetal position on the bathroom floor and cry for a few minutes. It's how I feel after all that.